My ex invited me to his wedding to show off his rich fiancée, but my unexpected plus one turned the tables spectacularly. I'm a 22-year-old woman who met Dylan, a 30-year-old man, while we were both working part-time at Starbucks. Dylan was paying off his student loans at the time, and I was still in college saving money to move out of my parents' house permanently due to their excessive gambling. His parents had accrued large debts and were unable to provide for him. We first became close by talking about our families, but after a while, we discovered that we actually enjoyed being together. 2 years later, I graduated and had saved up enough cash to live independently. Dylan, however, had not been able to leave his parents' home because he was still having trouble paying off his student loans. I invited him to live with me, but he was unable to pay even his portion of the rent because of his debts. I agreed to pay 80% of the rent, and he would pay the other 20%. He gladly agreed. We divided utility costs equally, excluding rent. Dylan and I worked at separate companies. I had a corporate career with a flexible schedule, while his job was hands-on and required him to be on site for extended periods. As long as I achieved my goals, my supervisor didn't object if I worked from home. Dylan was frequently unable to assist around the house due to his rigorous work schedule. I therefore cleaned, cooked, did the laundry, and did the dishes. Since I knew how hard his job was, I didn't mind doing the majority of the housekeeping. He was always the last to eat, though, so I did ask him to carry out the trash. Sadly, Dylan would always forget, so I was left to carry out the garbage each morning I had to leave for work. One weekend, the house was in utter chaos when I got back. Empty food packets, chocolate wrappers, and unwashed dishes littered the kitchen counter. The trash hadn't been removed, and the wash had accumulated. I just wanted to relax after a hard day at work, but the clutter was intolerable. In the hopes that Dylan would notice and value my efforts, I cleaned all evening. He stated he missed me and gave me a warm welcome when he got home, but he didn't appear to notice the change in the house. Instead, he sat down to watch his game right away, which made me feel dissatisfied and undervalued. I started crying. For the first time, I realized how little he appreciated me, whether it was because of his lack of appreciation, his tiredness, or his insomnia. Is something wrong? Dylan questioned. Looking back, I told him I was ready to go to bed and shook my head, acting like nothing was wrong. I reminded him again to take out the garbage before I went upstairs. He replied with a nod. As anticipated, the rubbish was still present the following morning. I became irate when Dylan asked me for breakfast as he entered the kitchen. If he wanted to eat, I told him he could prepare his own food. I lost it when he accused me of being impolite. He was worthless around the house, so I screamed at him. He implored me not to be so theatrical and blinked as though he had done nothing wrong. After inhaling deeply, I questioned him about why he never took out the trash. I forgot, he responded nonchalantly. After that, I asked him what he really did around the house except coming home and drinking beer while watching TV. He started out by saying that he deserved some downtime because he was constantly exhausted after work. After agreeing and nodding, I questioned, how about me? I reminded him that I cleaned the house, cooked for the two of us, did the laundry, and even ironed his shirts for the week after I got home from work. I asked him to take out the trash, and that was all. Dylan said he never requested me to perform such things, so he dismissed me. He continued by saying that his job was really difficult and that I should be able to relate to him and support him as his girlfriend. He even attempted to defend his position by saying that his mother had always treated his father in the same way. I was enraged to hear this. I became aware that even though we weren't even married, I was allowing him to take advantage of me, in spite of all the work I was doing to keep the house in order. I gave him a direct look and informed him that I would no longer be helping him around the house. We were meant to be equals, and I wasn't his mother. I told him he had to prepare his own meals, clean up after himself, do his own laundry, iron his own clothing, and take out the trash. He began to object as his eyes grew wide, but I stopped him with a raised hand. I also told him that he had to pay half the rent or leave. Incredulous, Dylan questioned the source of this. I clarified that I was fed up with putting in so much effort for him and not feeling valued. I left the house since I was running late for work, but he seemed to want to dispute. I had never set such firm boundaries in my life before, and I didn't feel bad about it. I followed through on my promise to do no more than clean up after myself. Seeing him fumble about the home to find clean clothing or iron his shirts before work was strangely pleasant. He didn't take out the garbage or clean the utensils, thinking I would do it for him later, but I said no. I chose to eat from takeout boxes so I could conveniently dispose of my trash without having to step into the kitchen. When the dishes began to build up and the smell grew intolerable, Dylan made multiple attempts to speak with me, urging me to be a good partner and look after him, but I remained steadfast and uncompromising. When it came time to pay the rent, I told the landlord that Dylan would cover the other half and gave her my 50% up front. When he got home, he was furious and yelled at me to keep paying the same 80%. Reminding him that he never showed gratitude when I did, I firmly declined. I had finished assisting him. Despite his best efforts to make excuses, he was eventually forced to give the landlord his portion of the rent. He never once expressed regret to me during this entire ordeal. He never took the time to own up to his errors or show remorse for not appreciating the housework I had done. It was really disappointing. In retrospect, I wish I had recognized him sooner for who he really was. Our arguments continued to get worse over the following few months, with Dylan accusing me of being to blame for everything and attempting to deceive me into returning to my previous behavior. For Dylan, my promotion at work seemed to be the final straw. Dylan must have heard about it from one of our mutual friends who happened to be my coworker, because that night we had the most intense argument of our relationship. After getting home intoxicated, Dylan woke me up and said that he needed to speak with me. Since he was obviously inebriated from the celebration with my friends that evening, I suggested that we speak tomorrow. I was so sleepy and irritated that I sat up in bed and asked him what was so essential that he had to wake me up in the middle of the night, but he said it was vital. Dylan then admitted, inebriated, that he had met someone at work. I realized right away that he was referring to Bella. He had brought me along to one of his office parties where I had seen her. Bella was 25 years old, obviously quite wealthy, and the daughter of an industrialist. Her father's insistence that she required work experience was the only reason she worked. Dylan continued by saying that he was falling for her because, in his opinion, she was a real woman, in contrast to me. I honestly didn't care, so I stared at him without feeling anything. We were really just roommates at this time, and I knew that our relationship had been deteriorating for months. He went on to discuss his feelings for Bella, but I interrupted him in the middle of his statement. I told Dylan that I was pleased for him and didn't care if he was dating someone else. I recommended that we end our relationship amicably and that he vacate our home right away. Dylan inquired whether I was envious of Bella, seeming shocked, telling him that I was genuinely relieved he had met someone else so I wouldn't feel bad about ending our relationship. I shook my head and grinned. Anger made Dylan's face flush. He said that my promotion had made me more self-assured. I told him calmly that our connection had nothing to do with my advancement. I had just come to the conclusion that we were no longer compatible during the last few months. I clarified that I could understand his desire to see someone else because we had evolved into more of a roommate than a love partner. Dylan began yelling, which surprised me because I assumed he would be relieved. He claimed to despise modern women who show off their careers like me. He said Bella was a lot better woman because all she wanted was to marry and have kids. I remained composed and reminded him that every woman had different requirements, in spite of his yelling. I loved my job, but Bella might not care as much about it because she comes from a wealthy household. I advised him to be with Bella if he desired someone similar to her. I reaffirmed that we should stop arguing and that he was free to leave our home whenever he wanted. With wide eyes, he inquired about my ability to pay the rent. I clarified that I could now pay the full rent on my own without the assistance of roommates because I had received a rise. He started yelling at me after hearing this, accusing me of trying to brag in front of him. He continued by saying that Bella was wealthier than I was and even owned a home that her father had purchased for her. He insisted that I become more complacent and change who I was. Then he scoffed, stating that men ultimately desired a housewife rather than a lady who could make more money than they could. I was sick of arguing with him in the middle of the night, so I finally begged him to stop talking. I informed him that he could sleep on the couch until the end of the month, after which he would have to move out. Even though I could still hear him complaining, I chose to ignore him and resumed my slumber. Thankfully, Dylan began packing and gradually removing his belongings during the course of the week. As I considered the possibility of eventually having the entire property to myself, I began to feel excited. When I returned home last night, I was startled to see Dylan and Bella seated on our couch. I gave him a questioning glance, and he told me that he wanted to show Bella his apartment because it was his last night there. Knowing that I would return, I found it incomprehensible that he would bring another lady into our home without my permission. I greeted Bella pleasantly because I didn't want to be impolite, and I believed that this wasn't her fault. I was shocked to see how disdainfully she regarded me and didn't even acknowledge me. I went to freshen up, not wanting to take anything personally. Later, Bella came to fetch some water while I was in the kitchen making spaghetti for myself. I felt uncomfortable for a minute as she stood there observing me. She looked at me with the same disdain as before when I inquired if she wanted anything. I chose to ignore her and carried on preparing my lunch with the intention of eating it quietly in my room. I was about to head downstairs after eating when I heard Bella and Dylan conversing. Bella was telling Dylan how fortunate he was to have upgraded himself after dating someone who looked like me. Dylan laughed and agreed with her, and I froze in disbelief. When Bella questioned him about why he had ever fallen in love with me, Dylan replied something that broke my heart. Because I was naive enough to lend him money during college and pay for our dates. He admitted that he had taken advantage of me. He disclosed that he had been able to save a significant amount of money because I had been paying over half the rent for the previous 2 years. I was shocked by what I had just heard. I had assumed that he might have taken advantage of my kindness to pay over half his rent, but I was unaware that he had been taking advantage of me from the start. Bella and Dylan persisted in discussing our connection and making fun of me in every manner they could. I was on the verge of crying out of embarrassment, but I didn't want them to see me that way. I went back upstairs quietly and sobbed into my pillow for the remainder of the night. When I woke up the following morning, Bella and Dylan had left. He had formally moved out after gathering his belongings. I finally realized I was free of him, and I wandered around the home in a stupor. The sense of relief I experienced upon realizing that he was finally no longer in my house or in my life is beyond words. I danced around the house and shed happy tears. After that, I started to clean the entire place to remove all traces of him. I really appreciated being independent throughout the course of the following few weeks. What Bella and Dylan had said about me no longer mattered to me. Everything was well until 2 months later when a mutual buddy told me at work that Dylan and Bella were getting married. It all seemed too abrupt, and I was surprised. When our buddy showed me their engagement photos, they looked like a happy couple. I acknowledged that I would never have been content with Dylan anyhow, but I also felt a twinge of regret for how he had taken advantage of me throughout the years. I was thus thrilled that he had discovered someone who could bring him joy. When I returned home that evening and looked in my mailbox, I discovered an unexpected wedding invitation. When I recognized that it was from Dylan and Bella, my eyes widened in surprise. I initially believed it might have been an error or that he had invited me out of courtesy, until I opened the invitation and noticed something scrolled in the corner. Inside the card was written, "I want you to attend my wedding so you can see the grand life I'm going to have with Bella." Slowly, it dawned on me that he had asked me just to flaunt his newfound fortune, his marriage, and his wealthy spouse. I inhaled deeply as I tried to figure out why he would invite me in this way, given that all I had done over the years was look after him. My pent-up rage and resentment from all the years started to explode. I had to be petty with him, I realized. With a +1, I replied yes. I was determined to make Dylan regret ever inviting me, and I had a scheme in the works. After turning on my laptop, I started looking through Bella's social media accounts. I looked at every photo she had ever uploaded. Fortunately, I was able to locate what I was searching for. Bella and her ex-boyfriend, Jake, had broken up just 6 months prior. They had obviously been dating for a very long time because she had multiple postings with him, and their photos went all the way back to high school. Jake accepted my friend request from my profile, and I messaged him. After he said yes, I was shocked when he answered, and we struck up a conversation. I informed him that I was Dylan's ex and that I intended to invite him as a guest to their wedding. I told Jake everything since he appeared interested and wanted to know why I was contacting him. Throughout the course of the following few weeks, Jake talked candidly about Bella's repeated infidelity. I was unaware that she had recently had an affair with Dylan. He went on to disclose Bella's constant attraction to older males. He wasn't overly shocked, therefore, when she confessed her love for Dylan while they were still dating. They broke up fairly badly, as you may guess, and even though she told Jake they should stay friends, he blocked her everywhere. He looked to still be in love with Bella based on the way he spoke about her. I also shared with Jake my own story of Dylan's abuse of me throughout the years. I opened up to him about everything that Dylan had done to me and how Bella and Dylan had teased me. When Jake learned how Dylan had spoken about me and treated me, he was horrified. Jake listened to everything and eventually consented to come with me. I became excited when I imagined how my ex and Bella would have looked when they spotted me at their wedding with Jake. As anticipated, Dylan's eyes widened as he saw me entering with my special guest on the wedding day. He must have known right away that Jake was Bella's ex. We pretended to locate our assigned seats, ignoring his expression. I just grinned when Dylan approached me and muttered angrily, "Why are you here with Bella's ex?" He had to reluctantly make his way back up the aisle while giving me a fierce look because he couldn't make a disturbance in front of everyone. Everyone got up from their chairs when the bride was ready to make her entrance. With her father by her side, Bella looked lovely in her white floor-length gown as she made her way down the aisle. Following a flawless ceremony, the festivities were transferred to the reception area. Since she was wearing a different dress when she arrived at the reception, Bella must have gone to change. Jake and I had not yet caught Bella's attention. She stopped dead in her tracks when she noticed Jake sitting next to me. Maybe still perplexed, Bella glanced at me and then at him. "What are you doing with him?" she asked Jake. Grinning, I informed her that I had asked him to join us as a guest to support her marriage. She asked Jake whether we were dating now. Looking furious, Bella's cheeks flushed with rage, but Jake said nothing, since this was an absurd question to ask in the first place. She gave me a sour look and nodded seriously when Jake asked if he could talk to her quietly, since he didn't want her to make a scene. After they left, I turned to see Dylan hawkishly observing our exchange. Dylan appeared worried, but he was powerless to do anything but sit there and act as though nothing was wrong. The celebration went on, and everyone appeared to be having a good time, but an hour had gone by, and the bride was nowhere to be seen. A few patrons began to take note and murmur to one another. When Bella's father became worried, he asked one of the bridesmaids to go see how she was doing. The bridesmaid ran up with a message in her hands a minute later. In front of everyone, she declared that Bella and her ex-boyfriend had fled. Everyone was stunned as they stood there. The bridesmaid went on to read the note, in which Bella acknowledged that she had made a grave mistake by marrying Dylan, and that meeting Jake had rekindled all of her old emotions. Dylan stood there looking vulnerable and ashamed, as the visitors were further taken aback by the revelation. I was really astonished too. Even though I had brought Jake along to annoy Dylan, I never would have thought that things would end out this way. Dylan appeared as though he was prepared to rip someone's head off. Bella's parents really apologized for what had transpired and asked everyone to leave. I saw Dylan, who had once been arrogant and pompous, stand there by himself, utterly shocked by Bella's choice. Even though I feel a little bad about the wedding, I'm also relieved that Dylan's attempt to make me look bad didn't work out so well. The day that was supposed to demonstrate his victory over me had turned into the scene of his demise. Am I the asshole for spoiling my ex's wedding by bringing his bride's ex as my guest? Ever since I shared my tale, I have been getting conflicting responses. Some of you believe I went a bit too far, but many of you concur that I made the correct decision. I should make it clear that I never intended to ruin my ex's wedding, and that I never mentioned it to Jake. I don't know what private conversations Bella and Jake had that led Bella to abruptly call off the wedding. Since my ex had asked me in the first place to flaunt his marriage to a wealthy woman like Bella, I just wanted to be spiteful with him. Bella's decision to end her marriage was entirely independent of me. I've texted Jake to ask him what happened, and I'll provide an update as soon as he responds. Second update. Jake contacted me in a lengthy text message that he gave me yesterday. He essentially expressed his gratitude for my taking him to the wedding. He informed me of his and Bella's honeymoon, which she was scheduled to have with Dylan. Her parents, who were quite concerned about her, had also been consulted. He told me that he will be seeing me shortly to personally explain everything. Dylan, meanwhile, had been contacting me constantly since the wedding. He blamed me for ending his marriage in a series of hostile text messages and phone calls. I never responded to him, and I had no desire to converse with him. I was aware that I had nothing to do with Bella and Jake's joint escape. Dylan chose to arrive at my house today, as he knew I would be home during the weekend. I initially requested him to go and wouldn't open the door. He insisted that he wouldn't go until he spoke with me. He could say anything he wanted to me standing outside my house, since I warned him he wasn't let inside. By opening the door a bit, Dylan began screaming at me, accusing me of ruining his life. He had apparently given notice at work, believing that after marrying someone as wealthy as Bella, he would never have to return. "Why did you bring Jake to our wedding?" he questioned me angrily. I decided to tell him that I had overheard all he said to Bella that evening, because I was becoming mad at him for blaming me. When I told him that I knew he had been using me to pay for our dates and his rent for all the years we dated, his eyes widened in surprise. He obviously didn't respect me, even though I assured him that I did all those things because I loved him. I also reminded him that I never bothered to become involved in his relationship and that I didn't care that much when he cheated on me with Bella. I was pushed over the brink, though, when he invited me to their wedding and wanted to show me the life he would lead with his wealthy spouse. I informed him that he had no right to visit my home and scold me for something that wasn't my fault. He should be upset with Bella because she was an adult and made the decision to leave him. Dylan began to scream back that I shouldn't punish him for the past, and that it wasn't his fault that I was so innocent the first didn't realize how he had been taking advantage of me for so long. As he went on to rave about how Bella was meant to transform his life and how he could have had everything he ever desired, I laughed at what he was saying. He disclosed that I had ruined his opportunity to flirt and woo Bella, despite his best efforts. I didn't want to listen to his statements any longer because they were so vile. At this point, I threatened to call the police if he didn't leave my property. I pulled out my phone and dialed in front of him. After he told me I would never dare to do that, he instantly retreated a few steps. As he was departing, he told me not to overreact. I vowed to myself that this would be the last time I saw him before I closed the door. I have now told my family about the incident and blocked him everywhere. In order to document his actions and lodge a formal complaint against him in the event that he returns, I intend to install a camera on my door and change the locks on my property. Update 3. I haven't provided an update in a month. I didn't have time to respond to everyone who has been messaging me to inquire about whether Jake and I had ever met, because I've been so busy at work. I'm glad to say that we did, last week. Jake said he was ready to chat and invited me to lunch. Bella was seated behind him when I arrived at the location. I thought Bella was coming to pick a fight with me, so I instantly braced myself. To my amazement, though, she greeted me with a warm grin and a kind word when she spotted me. Jake reassured me that she was merely there to apologize, even if I wasn't really sure why she was there. Bella nodded and really apologized for her previous words toward me. She continued by telling Dylan her story. She disclosed that she would constantly receive a lot of attention and kindness from Dylan at work. They spent a lot of time together due to their hectic work schedules, and Dylan would often gripe about me and our relationship. He would express his dissatisfaction and his wish that he had a woman as attractive as Bella. She acknowledged that every time he gave her a compliment, she felt gratified and began to feel sorry for him. She got overly passionate and even slept with Dylan during a difficult time when she and Jake were going through a difficult time. Dylan then persuaded her to end their relationship, claiming that Jake wasn't suitable for her. Dylan kept messaging her, telling her that she was ideal for him and that they could live together. She eventually ended her relationship with Jake because she felt bad about cheating on him, and she believed that she could be content with Dylan, even if they were different in age. Bella went on to describe how seeing me made her feel uneasy. She acknowledged that she coveted my independence and the fact that I didn't actually require a partner to look after me. She expressed regret for offending me. I explained to her how hard I had worked my entire life to get to where I am now at work, and that I could understand her perspective. Her eyes were downcast as she nodded seriously. After that, I asked her to describe what had transpired at her wedding to Dylan. She admitted that she was taken aback to see Jake when I took him to the wedding. She had never felt the same way about Dylan until she saw Jake's face and understood how much she still loved him. Jake told me that they discovered they still loved each other after they talked about their sentiments in private at the wedding. Bella left a note for her family, so they made the decision to flee together. They were deeply in love and had been together since that day. Bella told me that she discussed this with her parents. They were furious at first, but in the end, they chose to stand by her. Additionally, she disclosed that she intended to apply for an annulment with Dylan shortly. Even though I wasn't totally comfortable hearing this, I was glad that at least two people were content following the terrible occurrences. I could tell Bella and Jake were beaming at one another. After eating lunch and continuing our conversation, we finally said our goodbyes. I haven't spoken to either of them much since that conversation and don't want to be involved in their drama. I intend to continue working hard at my profession and concentrating on myself. I'm not sure what Dylan's future holds, but I hope he can eventually grow from his mistakes and refrain from pursuing partners for financial gain.